at compositing, and that often means that we're taking images from disparate sources and bringing them together to create some kind of composition. Oftentimes, if these images are from different sources, they'll often have very different lighting, direction, and color casts. These are environmental attributes that in the end need to be dealt with in order to reconcile these objects to their new environments. It's often the case where the photographer can control a lot of this in the studio. So when you're doing product photography, still lifes, and things of that nature, you're controlling the lighting, and you're able to photograph all of your objects often against a green screen or a cyclorama or just against a neutral background. The reason being is that when you're compositing images, it often means you need to select portions of that image for transfer to another image where they're going to be composited. So the ability to be able to differentiate the object that you want from the background is really important. So when you have a background that's very plain, not a lot of detail like we have here, it makes the job of selecting the object, in this case Rubber Ducky, that much easier. We don't always have that luxury, as we're going to see later when we start doing our composition with the lion. Now, there's a number of tools that are given to us within Photoshop that allow us to perform selections, because that's our way of telling the software which elements we want or which elements we wish to exclude. And so when we're choosing to select an element, it's often easiest to select the thing which is most alike, in this case the background. It's almost predominantly white, and so selecting that makes it rather easy. Other situations that make selection easy is where there are very strong edge boundaries. Again, Rubber Ducky's a great candidate for this because there's a clear demarcation between the object, the duck, and the background, the white. We have a strong line, so we're able to use edge detection methods in order to build very quick selections. As we're going to see, there are some manual ways in which to do it using a sort of painterly approach, but right now we're going to look at some of the selection tools. Right off the top, we've got some rectilinear ones here and ovoid selection marquees, as they're called. We've got single row and single column, 1 pixel wide, which are used by web developers to pad web pages. And below that, we have the Lasso Tool and a number of other related tools as well. The Lasso Tool allows you to literally lasso an area. And you'll notice that there's a scintillating border that's referred to as marching ants because it looks like a column of marching ants. And it's also referred to as a marquee, the allusion being to a cavalcade of lights over top of a theatrical marquee. That indicates that this is the area which has been selected. Now you'll notice at the top of the window we have these icons which allow you to add to a selection, subtract, or create an intersection between two selections. First, let's just look at how the selection criteria works. Every time we select something and we make another selection, the previous selection disappears. So that's something to keep in mind. To make a selection disappear, Command D to deselect. That's a shortcut worth remembering, Command D. So I'm just going to select a section here, and now I'm going to use the add function. So that means if I add a little bit more, if I didn't get exactly everything that I wanted, I can continue to add in and build my selection in this manner. If I've gone too far and selected some of the background, I can then use the subtract icon, and of course it subtracts. And this allows me to remove. I can even remove areas from the center. If I go back to the add icon, I can add another section. They don't need to be continuous. And so I can subtract from that. I could choose the intersection. So if I were to create a selection through there, it would give me the intersection of those two selections, or those multiple selections. So those are all the ways in which we can select using that Lasso tool, Command D to deselect. There are keyboard shortcuts that are worth noting. So there's a selection. If I hold the Shift key down, that allows me to add to the selection. If I hold the Option key down, that allows me to subtract from a selection. Command D to deselect. So that's the Lasso tool. The next one up is the Polygon Lasso tool, and it's more suited for things that are very geometric and linear. You click down and you'll notice that a rubber band kind of follows you around. And if I click down again, it closes it up or connects the points. Once you double click, it closes the point from where you double clicked to the point where the selecting process originated. So that's it, Command D to deselect. The next one in that trio is called the Magnetic Lasso tool, and it uses an edge detection algorithm. There are some things that control its behavior up here in the control panel. We'll get to this feathering in a little bit and anti-aliasing, but here's what I want to draw your attention to. The width determines a sample area, so it's talking about a 10 pixel radius in which it's analyzing the pixels, looking for stark contrast. It's the stark contrast, either in color or it can be in its value or tint. It's looking for stark contrasts, and based on that, it detects whether or not there's an edge there. The contrast level tells it, in a sense, how sensitive it is. The higher that number, the more stark a contrast it has to find in order to determine that it's following an edge. The frequency is the number of points that it samples and plots along the way as it starts to build a selection for you. So let's just drop this down to a frequency of 35, and I'm just going to start the process now. Command 0 to zoom out, and you'll notice as I start moving, it's detecting the edge for me. And it's automatically figuring that out and tracing that image. I've just got to get within that edge within about 10 pixels so that it sees it. It's able even to differentiate between the bottom of the duck and the shadow region. And I'll just go right around there, and it follows that entire edge. And provided I'm within about 10 pixels of that edge, it goes and it traces it. Now I may need to make little adjustments here and there. Remember, Option key allows me to remove a little bit. And Shift key would allow me to add. Now once you've got a selection like this, that could have been a considerable amount of work. You want to be able to save them, and you can do that through the Select menu. Select, Save Selection. And we can give it a name, Ducky, and we've saved that selection. Command D to deselect. How do I get that selection back? Well, there's one of two ways. If we go to Channels, you'll notice that it's created this, it's really a mask, or it's also called an alpha channel, which corresponds to that selected outline that we created. I simply need to drag this down to the bottom here, and it automatically converts that to a selection. Now I'm just going to go back to my image, and I'm going to switch off that alpha channel. And here we have the selection. Command D to deselect. So that's one way in which we can retrieve our selection. Another way is to go to the Select menu, Load Selection, and then we can select the name of the selection from here. We may have several selections from the same file, and we could name them all differently. I could create a selection for the orange beak and save that and call it beak. Just click OK, and it reloads that selection. Once you have a selection, you can make modifications to it. So if we go to Select, Modify, we can feather it, and we'll talk about what feathering is in just a moment. We can expand that selection, or we can contract it. Now I want to just contract it just by 1 pixel. Typically, once you've created a selection, you want to pull the selection border in just ever so slightly, so you're not accidentally capturing some of these lighter pixels here, because doing so would give your captured object an aura of white. So we don't want that border or that fringe detail on there. So I've contracted the selection. You can also smooth the selection out. Select, Modify, and you can smooth it. And let's just put 5 pixels in there. And it would smooth that selection out if it was a very rough one. Now, at any time, if I've made any adjustments, so I'm just going to use Option, Option, and I'm just going to subtract some of that selection there. There. I've made a slight change. I'm just going to resave that, Save Selection, and I'm just going to save it right over the existing channel and ask that it replace the one that I had. Notice that I can add to selections, I can subtract, and create intersections, just like I could up here. So we've resaved that selection for ourselves. Now, Command D to deselect. Now we're going to look at some of the other options with the Lasso Tool. You'll notice there's this thing here called Anti-Alias. I love my Anti-Alias. She's a fine old gal. I'm just going to select a section here of the head. And I'm going to copy it. So Command C, Command D to deselect, and Command V to paste. I'm just going to paste that in here. I'm going to go back to my Layers panel, so you can see my layers here. Go back onto the duck again, make sure that I've got that selected. I'm just going to unlock it just by clicking the lock icon. It's now unlocked. Okay, this time I'm going to select it, but I'm going to switch off the anti-alias feature. So this time, selecting pretty much the same thing again. Command C, Command D, Command V, and I'm just going to move that section over. And we're going to do a little comparison. So I'm going to zoom in, spacebar Command, and we just start to zoom in here. Maybe I've gone too far. Okay, you will notice that there's a significant difference between the two. The one on the top looks more jagged than the one on the bottom. That's because the one on the bottom is using what is called anti-aliasing, and it's looking at the background into which the object's being pasted. It realizes that it's white, and what it does is it tries to intermittently blend the edge pixels to the background using varied percentages of the background color and the foreground color. That creates a sort of edge blurring, which in effect, when seen from a bit of a distance, makes it seem much smoother. By contrast, when we don't use the anti-aliasing, the edges are very stark. So there's none of that edge blending that we saw earlier in this example here. So that's anti-aliasing. The final piece, I'm just going to go back and select, make sure I'm on my layer. Because if I'm not, let's say I'm here, and I go to select, there's nothing there. Oops. And so copying, pasting wouldn't do anything for me. So I'm back on this layer, and this time we're going to feather. And let's use 12 pixels for feathering. And again, I'll select that same section. Command C, Command D, Command V. And you can see that feathering transitions the selection from full intensity in the foreground to 0% fully blended into the background. So it's a kind of ghosted edge. We're going to use something similar to that when we composite the lion in order to get the hair to integrate into the background nicely. So that's feathering, anti-aliasing. Now, I'm going to take a look at another method. I'm just going to get rid of some of these copies. So I select these layers and then just throw them in the trash. Another technique is using what's called the quick selection tool. It's a painter kind of tool here. Again, similar things. We can add to a selection, subtract from a selection. We can choose the size of our brush. And we have a thing here called hardness. That's the edge of the brush is either soft. You can see this brush here, very soft, gradual edge, or a very abrupt, sorry, that was the wrong slider, or a very hard edge to the brush. You can see that there. And if we were trying to select things that had hair in it, we'd use a very soft-edged brush. As it is, our graphic is fairly stark, so we can use a hard-edged brush. Spacing is the amount of samples that it's taking. So here we go. I'm going to use this. By the way, the larger the brush, the broader selection criteria we're using. The smaller the brush, it's more persnickety about what and where it's selecting. So you'll notice, as I move through, it's detecting these similar areas, including this area at the bottom. And again, I can use Option key and just instruct it to delete this stuff. Just like that. So that's a pretty simple method for selecting. And that's the quick selection tool. Command D to deselect. Another one is the magic wand tool. And this allows us to exploit color samples in the image and have this tool go out and look for similar colors in that image. The first thing that it does is it takes a sample of wherever you click down, and then it goes out and tries to find pixels that are similar to it. How similar? Well, that's determined by a number of things. First of all, the sample size. When I choose point sample, it samples immediately below the cursor when I click down. I could say, well, give me an average 5 by 5 pixels. So 25 pixels from where I click down, and it calculates the average color, and then it starts looking for colors close to that average color. Command D to deselect. There's another thing here called tolerance. And this determines how close a match the colors have to be to the original sample. If there's a very high tolerance, it will give you a very broad selection. If there's a very low tolerance, it will give you a very limited selection. So let's take a look at that. Let's use a tolerance of 5. So when I click down, you will notice that it gives me a very small sample size. Command D to deselect. Let's increase that to 25 and see what happens. Notice that it's including more yellow. Now there's another thing here that I want you to be aware of, and it's this thing called contiguous. It means it spreads out and starts to include pixels that are like itself, that fall within its tolerance range. Now there may well be pixels over here that are exactly the same color, but because I said it was contiguous, it cannot sample in these regions over here. It keeps spreading out, trying to bring more and more under the umbrella, but if they're not touching, it can't go over there and sample them. Watch what happens, Command D, if I switch this off. Notice that it's allowed now to jump all over that image and find pixels similar to itself. But when we do contiguous, it moves out the way on a continuous basis. Command D. Let's increase the tolerance to 60 and see what we get. And I can keep adding to that, just like everything else. I can hold the Shift key down and continue adding to that until everything was included. And say, well, I don't want that one. It's having some difficulty reconciling. So now would be a good time to change that tolerance level and make it a little bit less than we had it. So Option and remove that. Shift key to add some of that. Oh, it still doesn't like that. Command Z. I'll tighten that tolerance down to about 10 and then hold the Shift key down, and now it's behaving a little better now. Whoops. Option key to remove. And now I can add all these other colors in. I'm just using the Shift key here to continually add things in or subtract things, as the case may be. All right. So that's another way of building selections. So we've covered pretty much all the selection tools now. We're going to take this same technique into another environment, and for that we're going to look at the next section, and that's compositing our lion against a number of different backdrops. But before we do that, we're just going to take a look at one other thing. I'm just going to continue to add to that selection. So however you want to do it, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to use the quick selection tool so that I have it all selected. And then, of course, the Option key to remove unwanted areas. have it. And I'm just going to show you a thing called layer masking very quickly in this case. If I say layer, and I can say layer mask, reveal selection. It takes what's selected and reveals it, and the things that aren't selected are hidden from view. You'll notice what it's done here. It's created what we call a layer mask. And if I move this duck, the mask moves with it. If I go to the Edit menu and I transform my duck, so if I scale it, the mask also scales. Why? Because they're linked right here. If I unlink them, the mask might scale and the duck would stay the same size, in which case we'd see a little duck-shaped keyhole through which we would see some of that duck. Again, we can rotate things, scale them, skew them, just like that. We can also use a similar technique, so I'm just going to use, again, the quick selection method. I use the left bracket just to make it a little bit smaller. And this time, I use it to select the orange in the beak. So I've isolated the beak, and now I can say layer, new adjustment layer, and I'm going to change its hue and saturation. And you'll notice what it's done. It's created a mask connected to an image adjustment, which is up here. So we can now start to change the hue and the saturation of that duck. Okay? So we can isolate things like color changes using a very similar masking technique. Let's take a look at that here in the channels palette. We've got these two things called alpha channels. And if you look here, we've got the red, green, blue of the image. Let's just look at the mask on its own. There you can see it. There's the one for the duck just sitting on its own. There's the blue information in the file. There's the green information in the file. There's the red information. When we combine red and green, that gives us the yellow. When we combine red and blue, that gives us the magenta. And when we combine red and green, that gives us the cyan. Those are the complementary subtractive primary colors of the printed spectrum, pigments. There's the full-on RGB, red, green, blue image from the visible spectrum. And I just did that just so you could see what these masks look like. You'll notice when I put it on with the image at the same time, it appears in red. And the reason for that is, let me just going to cut some out here. Just going to hit the, whoops. I'm going to make sure I'm on this mask so I have it selected. And then if I just hit delete, notice I've got some feathering going on there. I'm just going to do Command Z. I'm just going to take the feathering off. Command D, set the feathering to 0. And then Command D. Okay, so the reason that it's red is because Photoshop when it was first developed, it was developed in consultation with pre-press people, printers, photographers, and darkroom specialists. And back in the day, when I was your age, if that's even conceivable, all of these multiple image compositions were done by hand in a darkroom. And the way in which it was done is that they would have a sheet of this clear mylar plastic with a film coating on it, much like tinting for car windows. And you would use an X-Acto knife to cut out an area. And you would literally take an X-Acto knife, just like I'm using the lasso. Imagine this is an X-Acto knife, and you would cut around this ruby lith very carefully by hand. And you'd cut a little piece like that, and then you would just peel it away. And you'd cut a little bit more. And you just peel it away. And if you accidentally peeled too much, then you would use a special pen that painted in red ink, and you would just paint right over top of it again. You could do it by airbrushing if you wanted a nice soft edge, or you would literally use a pen, an opaquing pen. I'm just going to give this a very hard edge up here. Whoop. And you would just opaque that. So you would continue just peeling it away and peeling it away. And what this did, because it was ruby colored or red, if you imagine a dark room with two film cameras or projection cameras pointed down at one piece of photographic paper, these were in larger cameras, and you would focus the two images down to the same area on the same piece of photographic paper, but then for one of the sides, for one of the projection systems, you would put this mask in there, cut away the areas that you didn't want or that you wanted to show through, and this red, in a sense, was seen by the camera as black. Because as you know, red light does not get picked up by photographic paper. It sees it as black. So you can walk around in a dark room, switch on a red light, and it won't expose the paper. So by using ruby lith, this to the camera, to the naked eye, it was a clear, see-through red material, semi-transparent, and we could put it over an image, cut away the areas that, and peel away the areas that we wanted to create a little window in, and then project the image down through that window onto the photographic paper below. And that's exactly what these things are. They're just like little windows that we've cut through which we can project an image. And it won't project anything here where the black area is, only where this area is here. So we literally had to cut out masks by hand. And it showed. So it was a very special skill. I'm just going to switch that off, bring the image back, and go into layers. So we can use this masking technique to isolate areas of an image and also to target image adjustments such as hue and saturation, brightness, contrast, and some other things. And we're just going to leave it off there for now.